Gemara daf Tzadik Zayin Amar Aleph Hayoim Shiva Os Hayoim Shem Shnei Shavuos Shlosh Yom Loimer Matzah Shabbos Parshas Tazriya Mitzayir Beis Iyar. Zok the Heilige Gemara. We're almost halfway down on daf Tzadik Zayin Amar Aleph. Yeah. Zok the Heilige Mishnah Arba Snifin Shal Zov Hayusham. There were 4 boards of gold that were at the side of the shulchan. It sandwiched the 2 marachos of lechem aponim, and we even learned there was a brayso that said that the lechem aponim held up the snifim, and the snifim held up the lechem aponim. They're like a symbiotic relationship, so they work together. So, fact the Gemara, how do we know that they had these snifim? Amar Rav Katina, we know it's from a pasuk. Amar Kra, Vasisa, Karoisav, Kapoisav, Kesoisav, and Menachos. These are the Kalei HaMizbeach. So what do they refer to? Karoisav, Elu Defusin. And we learned that there were multiple Defusin. They set it up in, that they baked it in, that they took it out in. Kapoisav, those are the Bezicha Levina, the spoons that held the Levina. Elu Bezichan. Kesoisav, Elu snifin, Menachos elu kanim. Those are the pipes. So where does the word keshoisav come to mean boards? So Rashi says, Elu snifin meribuyu dekra. I assume it's because it's the lashon. I'm not sure what meribuyu dekra means. Just because it's an extra word, I'm not clear what meribuyu dekra means. But the lishna achrina, keshoisav miloshin kosha. Shemaksha halachem umechaska. It strengthens and hardens the lechem. It supports the shalo yishaver. That's what we said. It holds it up. It shouldn't fold over on itself. V'loy mipiyah shmua. It's not that I have a kabbalah from my rebbes. This is taich in the bosuk.
Means just from the word itself. In other words, it's not part of the shulchan officially. So why did the Torah have to tell us this?
Yeah, but how do you know that that's the snifin? But the Gemara, how do you know you need a snifin? So it lists off the kalim, and the size of the Gemara says is referring to the snifin. How do I know it's a snifin? Meribuyi dekra. It's just because there's an extra keli, so we assume it means that. So maybe that's shot. There's an extra keli, we don't know what it is, so we assume it means the snifin, and that's shot b'piyah shmua. Your Rebbe needs to tell you if there's a ribu what it's being marba. But the second shot is mineu bay in the word it has that much mois. I think that's touch. Kazak to Gemara weiter. And then the last one is Menachos of Elu Konim. Zok to Gemara, the pasuk goes weiter and says Asher Yusach Bahen, referring to these Kalim. So we learn Shemisachachin Bahem Esalechem. The Konim, which were the last Kalim listed, are Misachich. They hover over the Lechem, and Rashi is Masbir. Shemasachin Bahen Esalechem She'al Halechem Misachin HaKonim Ben Chalal Chaverta. Because they are on top of each lechem to separate between each lechem and the one below it, the one above it. Zok the Gemara, Moishev Rav, Frek Rav Akasha. The Brisa says, Lo Yisider. I think our Mishnah says that Lo Yisider Akonim V'Leniti Loson. The setup of these kalim doiches as a Shabbos. They're not doiches Shabbos, right? We learned the kohen came and did it before Shabbos, right? Frag the Gemara of Hisokedai Deraisa. If you're bringing a rye from Psukim, that means there's a chiv deraisa to have these.
They took out the kohen before Shabbos.
They took everything off before Shabbos,
and they left the old
bread just piled up.
Yeah, when did they put the new ones? When did they put
on Shabbos? They took off the old breads. They put the new ones on without the kalim, and then Motzei Shabbos kalim, which the Gemara is going to illustrate very shortly. If you hold that there's a chiv deraisa to have these, why won't it be doiches Shabbos? So the problem is, and if they were derabanan, let's say there was only a chiv to have these kalim derabanan, it should also be doiches Shabbos. What's the difference? Because what's the problem with these kalim? Maybe they're muksa. So ain't Shabbos b'mikdash. It's not boina. I know for sure it's not boina. How do I know? I'll tell you in a second how I know. So I'm asking you, Akasha, It's masha. The Gemara only has a kasha if it was their rice. If it was their bun, there wouldn't be a kasha, right?
Why should their even make something which is?
But kasha v'maisa. If the rabbanim were masakin that you need to have these kalim, why shouldn't it also be doicha Shabbos? If assuming that the problem is muksa and Shabbos Mikdash. So this is Rashi's kasha. So let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, Amai loy dochi Shabbos. Zogt Rashi, Fa'afal gav the ein Shavuos b'mikdash. There's no Shavuos b'mikdash. Meaning oy bazoi, even if it was a derbanon. Zogt Rashi, hi tiltul lav mishum Shavuosu el de michse keboine v'soiser. There's a massive chiddush. You're right. If it was only because of muksa, the Gemara could not send kasha even midrabanan. But this is not muksa. This is because it's a mechse kaboin of a soiser, and that is yesh shavus b'mikdash. What's pshat? It's a derabanan. So the Mesivta brings down from one of the Mefarshim that the Isra Mukta. Why did they make this a muksa? It says in the Aktama of the Mishabura, muksa was made because it's possible to go through a whole Shabbos, not be over any malachas, but still be working hard a whole day. Move heavy bricks and heavy blocks. There's no malacha involved. So Chazal made muksa because he wanted to protect the kedusha of the day. It should be a day of rest. But no, it's not a harchaka. It's bedavka, not a harchaka. It's not going to lead to a deraisa. It's just that it's going to take away the kedusha sayyim that you want to menucha. So that's the word. That ain't Shavuos b'mikdash. But mechze kaboini v'soiser, meaning if it looks like boini v'soiser, meaning if you do that, you might come to do boini v'soiser. That's a chash of our chokah. There we say Shavuos b'mikdash. That's what somebody wants to tell you. So Rashi knows that we say Shavuos b'mikdash is only muksa, which is a completely zaytige d'rabbanan d'kachiyv. But if it's a chash into our chokah from a deraisa, such a Shavuos would be b'mikdash. Therefore, if the chiyuv to have these kalim would only be midrabanan, it wouldn't be doicha the rabbanan dekarchaka that it's a mechzer kaboyin v'seiser.
Yeah, so why does it have to be the rice then?
If it's the raisa, then you can ask a kasha. If there's a chiyuv midaraisa, then you can ask. You should do it on Shabbos, even though you're normally makbid on something that's near kaboyin v'seiser. But the Torah says do it. Zok to Gemara, the Torah says it's not a kasha. Hadar Amarava lav milsahi. It's not shver. Lav milsahu da amri. My kasha kan kasha nicht. It's none we learned, and this is our Mishnah. Kalal Amar Abakiva. Kol malacha she'efsher lo la'asoisa ma'erev Shabbos. And you lechas a Shabbos. V'hani nami the being mistader the menaki yoisov efsher the lodachi Shabbos alayu. Why? Time am I? What's the whole reason why you have this whole setup? Is the loyli apish lechem, so that the bread shouldn't be piled on one another and start to spoil. But b'chihai shiura zakrashi, in the small amount of time from Friday right before the Zman when they would take it apart till they would take the lechem upon him off the shulchan, that's one time, and then the other time is the time from around Chatzois where they put the new lechem upon him on until Motzei Shabbos when they would once again be mesader. So each one was only half a day. If it sits there for a week, it'll be mapish. But for half a day, it wouldn't be mapish.
It was hot the whole week, so they wouldn't be mapish.
There was such a chash, that's why they were not kids over there. So let's see what it says over here.
Even though it wouldn't be mapish for Maisa, but
we have to do ours. Torah thought this was of Shabbos. Arvis, they didn't make early Shabbos there. Ulamachar b'chatzayoy misalkoi u'misader achayim b'loy konim u'limotzai Shabbos misader akonim b'chihai shira. That time to have a chatzayoyim lezu v'chatzayoyim lezu loy me'apsha. Kidetanya, like we learned that they did this on Motzei Shabbos. Ketzad nipnas me'erev Shabbos v'sham tonu v'nichan la'arkei shal shulchan u'mitzai Shabbos nichnas. Now you have the breads piled up on one another. How do you get in the condom in between them? Magbir Raisha Shalchali, lift up one edge, umachlis condom tachtel, you push in one of these pipes. The choizer Magbir Raisha Shalchali umachlis condom tachtel. Arba chalos. Now it's piled up, if I'm not mistaken, 6 chalois. So the first 4 chalois, tzricha shloisha kanim. On top of the first, on top of the second, on top of the third, on top of the fourth, 3 times 4 is 12. The top one only needed 2 to be mafshek between that and the very top one. And it's time. What's the difference? Why do they all need 3 and this one needs 2? There's no weight on it. The weight of the first one and the second one, that's enough to have only 2 kanim. But the below that, now you have the weight of 2 breads pushing down, which would mean they can get closer to touch. So that's why they needed to have 3 kanim.
It's 6 rows, you have 5 spaces.
Right, so under the top, in the top space, they only needed 2, because there's only 1 bread pushing down.
Yeah.
But everyone lower than that were multiple breads pushing down, so that's why they had 3. Hatachtoina, underneath the bottom one, they didn't need either. And yitzricha kol iker lefisha Menachos al tahari shoshoch. So the kasha that I had was, so if it's touching the shulchan, it's only if 2 breads touch. If it touches the shulchan, it won't get me'absha.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So according to the shita where we had it, with the miskeres is around the outside and it leans out, so it couldn't. So there's a small little space. According to that, it's not saying that. But unless I guess that maybe it's only me'absha if 2 breads are together.
I have another question. There was in the Bismillah the Chaim, there was a shulchan and shayish, and to the meat they put on shayish because it should get hot, and the not on zahav. So see here it's going to be on zahav. The shulchan is zahav.
That's going to warm it up.
Going to warm it up. So
that could cross push. But I guess it was no problem. I mean, it's the mitzias. Yeah. Okay, Zek Gemara weiter. Tanan Tosam. Reb Meir Omer. Now we're getting into the complex part. Reb Meir Omer. Kol Amois shahayu b'mikdash beinoiniyos. Beinoiniyos means they're of 6 tvachim, and the Gemara is going to say that there must have been a bigger amma and a smaller amma. So the middle amma is 6 tvachim. Chutz mimizbeach hazov va'keren va'soiv va'yisoid. The mizbeach hazov, the keren of the mizbeach, the 4 corners. Va'soiv, that's the walkway around the mizbeach, almost around halfway up. Vayisoid, those were shel chamesh amos.
The keren of the chitzin.
Correct.
Yeah.
So chutz mimizbech hazav. Let's see Rashi. Shahaya amma al amma. Va'keren shel mizbeach ha'oila. Shahayu loyla arba pinois of arba avodim shel amma goyva va'ama al amma oive. Va'oisa amma hoisa ba'ama bas chamesh tvach. That amma was bas chamesh tvach. Now the question is, are we talking about the height of it, or are we talking about its horizontal space? That is not yet clear. The common mefarish, the koiva, the oirich v'reichav. I'm sorry?
Right,
but the amma goiva was 5?
Oh, it was 5.
Or it was amma, what was it?
This was all a lot of much. You know, or there was a reason for it.
We're going to read a pasuk soon. We're going to learn this out of a pasuk. Hayesoid v'asayved. We're all going to learn that out of a pasuk. Yeah, but that's exactly what the Gemara is going to be focused on today. Hayesoid v'asayved shel mizbech oila v'chulu mefarish lekaman. So according to Reb Meir, everyone was 6 except for the mizbech hazov itself, the keren, the soivev, and the yesoid. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Amas Binyan, the Amma of the construction of the building was Shisha Tvachim. But the Kalim was Chamisha, all the Kalim were Chamisha. Omar Rabbi Yochanan Ushneim Mikra Echadarshu. They both learned it out of one pasuk. Says in the pasuk, the Eila Midois Hamizbeach. Now this is a pasuk in Yecheskel where the Novis describing what the Mizbeach is going to look like. So let's look at this pasuk carefully. It's a cryptic pasuk. It's very hard to understand, and the Gemara is going to be analyzing it carefully. Ve'ela midos hamizbeach ba'amois ama v'toifach. So the Gemara is going to tell us in just a minute. When you're measuring the amois for the kalei for the mizbeach, the type of amma you're using is an amma that if you wanted to compare it to a regular amma, you'd have to add a tefach to it. Meaning, we're talking about an amma of 5 tefachim, which means in order to make it into an amma, the regular amma that are used for the dimensions of the base of Mikdash, you would have to add a tefach to it. So basically, the pasuk is saying is the following is the list of items that have an amma of 5 tvachim, not an amma of 6 tvachim. What are the items? The cheka amma, the amma roichav. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. What is cheka amma? Which amma is the cheka amma that's going to be an amma of 5 tvachim? And then the amma roichav, which is going to be the amma roichav that also is only an amma of 5 tvachim. And then ugavula el svasa saviv, which is talking about the keren, zeres ha'echad. And we're going to soon see what it means is a zeres is a half amma. From the center of each keren to its edge would be a zeres, which means it's an amma al amma. V'zeh gav ha'mizbeach, the Gemara is going to say is, and all these amma 5 tvachim also is the gav ha'mizbeach hazov. The mizbeach hazov, which is an amma al amma, is also a 5 tvachim. What we haven't clarified yet is what chek ha'ama, what amma roichav is, right? And we know we have our other shaila. Which amma are we talking about? Are we talking about an amma of height, an amma of horizontal, or maybe both? So that's what we need to clarify.
But amma means you're talking about the smaller amma or the bigger amma?
The smaller amma, the ammas that were used for the mizbeach. If you want, you have to add a tevach to it in order for it to be a regular amma. So let's look at Rashi on that. Amma v'tefach, al oisa amma teitzorach l'hoishav tefach. The Havabas Chamesh, Shechasira Tefach may Amma Beinanis. So what is it? What is it? Ba'ama is Amma v'Tefach. Ba'ama is Beinanis. Yeh Amma v'Tefach the Amma Yisov. The Hem B'Shal Chamesh the Havala Shal Shisha Amma v'Tefach Be'ilu. Okay. So Zog to Gemara. Now we're going to dash the pasuk. So let's read the pasuk. Now the Gemara is going to quote the pasuk. It's the same pasuk that we just read in the side. What has to be built with such an amma? V'cheka amma v'amma roichav ugavula el svasa saviv zeres ha'echad. And then v'zeh gav ha'mizbeach. So how do we dash in this pasuk? Cheka amma zeh yisoid. Zokt Rashi. Cheka amma kloimar be'elu amas ani oimer sheyehu b'neis chamesh. Which amma am I referring to? Zokt Novi. That's only 5 tvachim. V'cheka amma. The hanu yisoid the ola amma v'kanas amma. Right? Yisoid with up an amma and in an amma. Zeu yisoid. But we still don't know. Are we talking about the up or are we talking about the cross? We don't know that yet. Well, kamam nefarish behei amma is ka'amar ida goiva ida chnisa. So that's still unknown. It's going to develop through the Gemara. Gewaltig. What about?
So it's calling the Yosy Chayk.
Correct. Amar Roichav. I don't think it means it's calling the Yosy Chayk. The Amma of the Amma of the Yosy, the Chayk ha'Amma is the one that's supposed to be. The Chayk ha'Amma is the one that's supposed to be 5. The Gemara is going to say all the way to Maskana that the Chayk ha'Amma means the height. The Chayk ha'Amma means the height of that Amma Yisoid. Sorry?
Was met wat Chayk? Chayk meint a shoes.
Chayk meint a shoes. Okay, so it means the side.
This way then.
What?
And that would mean this way, no?
The Maskana Gemara is Chayk means the vertical.
So you get the Chayk.
Amma Roichav zeh soivev. And again, the Gemara's Maskana is that the Amma Roichav is the soivev, meaning the width of that walkway around was an Amma of 5.
Horizontal.
It's horizontal. So the Maskana is going to be a very weird that this Amma is the vertical and this Amma is horizontal. That's the Maskana because we're going to be stuck. The Gemara is going to try to keep it uniform at first, but it's just not going to work. Zog the Gemara, Ugvula el svasa saviv zeres ha'echad elu karnois. Zog Rashi, Gvula al svasa saviv elu karnois zeres is a chatzi amma ha'echad the meim tzoyis ha'even moedet. You're measuring from the center to each side. Vavezeres l'chol ruach. The hainu amalama, right? Because the zeres is a chatzi amma. And v'zegav hamizbeach. Zokt Gemara zeh mizbeach hazov. Zokt Rashi kloimer uva amazu this amma that we're talking about, the bas chomesh tvachim, also yenami mizbeach hazov. So now we're going to see how Reb Meir darshan this pasuk. Reb Meir Savar. Now I'm going to read Rashi here. Mizbeach hazov davakli yehei ba'ama bas chamisha v'hashar kelim ba'ama bas shisha. The Mizbeach hazov was an amma bas chamisha, but all the other kelim was an amma bas shisha, except for a few little components. So when you're measuring the Mizbeach, the 32 amas by 32 amas, 10 amas high, that was all an amma bas shisha tvachim, but there were two exceptions: the chek amma and the roichav amma, and the amma roichav. So Rav Meir Savar zeu ba'ama bas chamisha, hakol amis kelim ba'ama bas sheish. Rabbi Yehuda Savar kazeh yiu kol amos kelim, all the kelim are going to be 5. So I'm assuming so kasol gedaitach, so Meir Savar is kasol gedaitach. So now we're going to go according to Meir, we're going to figure this out, because Reb Meir said that even the kelim where you used an amma b'sheish, Rabbi Yehuda said all kelim, every part of it was amas bas chamish. But Reb Meir held was amas b'sheish, but there were some exceptions. So kasol kedaitach mi yisoid vat soivev, from the yisoid until the soivev, meaning from the floor up until the soivev, all of those amas were ba'ama bas chamesh begoiva, as the pasuk says, umay cheka amma va'ama reichev. What does it mean? Hachi ka'amar mecheka amma, from the cheka amma, which is the floor, v'ad roichev amma, until the soivev, which we're going to call the roichev amma, bas chamisha. It's going to be 5 tvachim. But the rest of the mizbeach is going to be an amma bas 6 tvachim. So in order for us to get clarity, let's go to the lowest common denominator and let's convert everything to tvachim. So first let's see Rashi. Kasol gedaydech mi yisoid ve'at soivev, oisa amos shall goy by yisoid, ve'oisa ha'amois shebein yisoid ve'soivev. So from the floor up until the soivev, ba'ama bas chomesh, mecheka amma means mina yisoid, by yisoid bechlal, the yisoid is also bechlal, meaning down to the floor, v'ad amma roichev v'ad yisoivev, ba'ama bas chomesh. So let's figure this out. If they were from the floor till the soivev, it was 6 amas. But it was an amma yisoid and then 5 amas of mizbeach till the soivev.
The whole thing was 10.
That's right, but those amas were 5 tvachim each. So 6 times 5 is 30. So we're up to 30 tvachim. Now from the soivev to the top was 4 amas, but it was 4 amas bas shisha tvachim. So that's 6 times 4 is 24. What's 30 plus 24? 54. So the mizbeach was in ganzen 54 tvachim high. Zog to Gemara, goyva mizbeach kama hava, eser amos, shis b'nei chamisha, varboy b'nei shita. Kum techais, mizbeach kama havi, chamisha varbo. Now we need to know what the halfway mark is. Why do we need to know what the halfway mark is? Because there was a rule. Achat ha'oiv, you have to spritz the dam lamata, on the lower half. And the other side you have to do on top. So where is that line? Right? Where in the Gemara can tell us there was a chut sikra. But where did they put the chut sikra? Zog the Gemara, Palga the Mizbeach Kama Hava, Esrim Vishiva, because 54 divided by 2 is 27. So let's figure this out. Mikarnois Vat Soivev. How many tfachim were there from the top of the keren to the surface of the soivev? 6 times 4 is 24, right? So Kama Hava Esrim Varba. So how much lower than the soivev is still considered the top half of the mizbeach that you could spritz the dam of the oilus oif there? So that means if some kohen wanted to do acrobatic work, standing on the soivev where he made the malika, and he wants to put the blood below the soivev where he's standing, he 3 tvachim, made up to 3 tvachim. So whether an amma is 5 tvachim or whether an amma is 6 tvachim, there's no way he can reach down the amma. That'll be possible. It'll be below the chut sikra. 3 tvachim is the max. That's an important thing. Utanan we learned chut shel sikra choy groi be'emtza. at the 27 tvachim mark, they put the chut sikra. So it should be clear. And that was exactly 3 tvachim below the level of the soiviv. Elahad Tanya, now we're trying to ask a kasha. Where's the kasha? Where are we going with this? So the Bach understood our frustration. And Zok the Bach, Elahad Tanya, Zau Soif Kusha. Don't worry, we're getting to the point. We're getting to the point. Don't be nervous. I never saw Bach like this. That he's warning you. I know it sounds like long, but there's no mistakes here. Everything is good. Don't think there's a mistake in the gear, sir. We're going to get there. And here's the punchline. The Tanya Gabe Oila Sa'oif. Haya Oila Bekevash, the Kohen would walk up with the bird up the ramp. If he didn't go to the top, he took the off ramp, the first exit, and he went to the right to the Soivev. Where did he arrive on the Soivev? He was on the southeast corner. Okay, that's where he made the Malika. And he was Mavdil against the Simonim. And then he squeezed the bird so the blood vessel should squirt the dam out on the wall of the Mizbeach. Now, what if he wanted to be an acrobat? What if he wanted to be an acrobat and spritz the blood below the level of the Soivev? Afilu amo achas kshera. Even if it was up to an amma down. Now, we just learned a minute ago, he has a maximum of 3 tvachim. Even if Nam is only 5, he's going to be going, he's 2 tvachim too far. If it's 6, it's even worse. So that is a problem that we have. We need to be able to have a cheshbon where an amma below the soivev is still al yoina. And based on this cheshbon, an amma below the soivev is tachtoina. So that's our problem. So because of that, the dimensions that we just laid out cannot be emes. So I was thinking to myself, Vosvar Meshuggah wants to do such an acrobatic move. Spurs like a mensch. So I thought to myself, we know Malika is from the hardest of avodas. But what's even harder than that is processing the Keteris and the Kodesh HaKodesh on Yom Kippur. So could be described it was like auditioning. He wanted to show a Kohen. I told you, look, I'm going to do such a trick. So maybe he'll get promoted to the Kohen Gadol. Otherwise, was felt the most in Mishigasm. So to Gemara, Ella, so we have to reverse. Elocheika Amma is Kanisa Amma. Roichev, or Amma Roichev is Kanisa. Meaning, we're not talking about the vertical. The vertical, all of the Ammas vertically, were all 6 tvachim. The horizontal Amma is going to be 5 tvachim. Vul Asvas Hasaviv is Kanisa. So now, let's do a cheshbon. It'll work out beautifully. Because 10 times 6, 10 Ammas times 6 tvachim is 60. The halfway mark is 30. All right, so let's look at Mizbeach Kama Havaloi Chitin. Palga the Mizbeach Kama Hava Klossen. So now let's see, from the Karnois to the Soivev is 4 Ammas. 6 times 4 is 24. So from 24, I have a whole Amma perfect. So Mamish works out beautiful. Kama Hava Klossen, the Karnois Vat Soivev Kama Hava Chav Dalit. Kama Botter Lapalga the Mizbeach. How many Tfachim are there still available below the Soivev that you'll still be above on this top half? Shisha. And that's what works out. But Tanan, perfect. So now that the Gemara solved the vertical height, now we have a new problem. Because now we're going to have to see if our floor plan fits in. Because now we just made the Mizbeach shorter. Instead of it being 32 by 32, based on 6 tvachim per amma, 3 of those ammas are not 6, but they're 5. So we're missing 3 tvachim on each side by the time you get to the top. So you're a full amma short, right? By the time you get to the top. So the Gemara is going to have a problem now. But Mayu came to Beknisa. Now you're telling me when we say amma 5 tvachim was the Yosy, the Soivev, and the Karnayim, or the Karnois of Mizbeach, that's going to mess us up now with the floor plan of the Mizbeach. Why? We have a Mishnah that describes in detail the dimensions of the footprint of the Mizbeach. Now, this is referring of 32 ammas of 6 tvachim each. Ola amma, the Yosod with Appa amma, V'kanas amma. So now the Mizbech above the Yosod is 30 by 30. Zeu Yosod, Nimsha Shloishim al Shloishim. In fact, Gemara, it's not really Shloishim al Shloishim, because it didn't go in a full Amma. It only went in 5 Tvachim. So I bezoi, it's Shloishim Ushnei Tvachim Avu. The Mizbech itself would be 30 and 2 Tvachim, because you have one Tavach from one side and one from the other side. Because instead of going in 6 Tvachim, you're only going in 5 Tvachim on either side.
How did we know that the Shloshim Shtayim was the...
We're going to get to that in a second. But I'll call upon him. The Gemara is going to prove it with the floor plan of the whole Beis Hamikdash and prove that it had to be that way. But we'll get there in a second. But I'll call upon him. You have a problem. It's not 30 by 30. It's 30 and 2 Tvachim by 30 and 2 Tvachim. But the problem gets worse. Visu, let's go to the next level. Allah Chamesh, and now you got to the Soivev. The Kanis Amma. Zeu Soivev. Now Nimsa Esrim Shmoina al Esrim Shmoina. Right? Now it's 28 by 28, but it's not, because it's 28 by 28 less 4 Tvachim. Esrim Shmoina va'arbet Tvachim ava. There's an extra 4 Tvachim there because you didn't go in 6 Tvachim each time. You only went in 5 Tvachim. On each level I lost 2. Exactly. If I lost 2, so it's no longer 28 by 28. It's 28 and 4 Tvachim by 28 and 4 Tvachim. No. If you want to say maybe the Tana only makes the distinction if there's a full Amma involved. Partial Ammas, it doesn't. Could you make it sound? Maybe the Mishnah only talks about full Ammas. The Mishnah doesn't discuss part Ammas. Keep the change, right? We don't discuss change. We don't discuss the dollars, right? In a lot of government forms, they tell you don't fill in the coins, just fill in the dollar amount. So the Mishnah maybe doesn't reckon sich with Tvachim.
Has a feature that if you bill is so and so, the extra few cents it puts away for you. So it adds up.
So Zok the Gemara, but it gets worse, because when we go up to the top level, now instead of it being 4 Tvachim deficit, it's now 6 Tvachim deficit. That's already a full Amma. So now the Mishnah should have said it. Mokum karnois amma mizeh. So kum techois, the surface of the mizbeach that's clear, that's not blocked by the keren, is eshem v'sheish al eshem v'sheish. But it's not true. It's eshem v'sheva havu. And that you can't say the Mishnah's loy duck for a part amma, because now we've lost the full amma. So I bezoi, it's eshem v'sheva. And for the Gemara, maybe even aval pikein loy duck. Maybe even on Amos is loydok. It's giving approximate. It's not cheshboning the fact that it's Amabas Chameshes Tvach. Okay, shine. But it gets worse. Mokem hiluch ragla kehanim amma mizeh. There had to be a clear path for the kohen to walk around the perimeter of the mizbeach. Now it couldn't be right at the end because we'd bump it to the keren. How would he get around the corner? So there was a path, an amma in from the kronos, so they can go all the way around. Which means, in between those two, in between that path, how much clear space did you have to build a maracha? Nimtza esrim va'arba al esrim va'arba would be the mokim hamaracha. That's what the Mishnah says. Frekt Gemara, but once again, we're an amma off. So esrim v'chamisha avoy, right? V'chitema hachanam miladok. If you want to say, yeah, that's what we're saying. They're not mocked. The Mishnah wasn't medayik on that part. The problem is, that's what you could say about a Mishnah. You could say the Tana is loydok, but you can't say loydok about a pasuk. The problem is, v'aksiv, it says in the pasuk, the ha'ariel, which is referring to the makom hamarocha, shteim esrei oirich b'shteim esrei oirich. It was 12 by 12. Now we're going to see in a minute, 12 by 12 means each quadrant. If you split the makom hamarocha into 4 quadrants, each quadrant was 12 by 12, which means 24 by 24. It was 4 squares. You might think it means that's all there was, but no. Each quadrant had that. From the center of the Mizbeach, he measured 12 amas to each side till he got to the path that the Kohanim used. But the problem is that the pasuk's not accurate. It's really going to be 25 amas. So it's 12 and a half amas to each direction. And that you can't say anymore. So now we're stuck. Our horizontal dimensions don't work. Zok the Gemara, lavdavke, because you asked me right away. Who said when it says 32 amos or 32 amos, it means 32 amos of 6 tvachim? Maybe it's 32 amos of 5 tvachim. Now, it can't be 5 tvachim either, because it was only those amos that were 5 tvachim. The rest of the amos were talking 6 tvachim. So the Gemara wants to make it very complicated. When the Torah says that where the Mishnah says that the Mizbech was 32, not all of the amos were equal. Out of the 32 amos, only 31, only 29 amos were 6 tvachim, but 3 of the amos were only 5 tvachim. So now it doesn't even help us.
It's going in.
Yeah. So those amos were only 5 tvachim, not 6 tvachim. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 amos. There were 6 amos that were only bas chamisha tvachim.
You see that in the pasuk?
No, it's not the pasuk. This is the.
How would you put that in the pasuk? You have to say duck on the pasuk.
The pasuk doesn't talk. It doesn't say 32 by 32. It's only a Mishnah. This is 32 by 32. The pasuk never says 32 by 32. That was the Mishnah that talks about the footprint. So the Mishnah, when it says 32, some are azoi, some are azoi. It's getting very schwer because then the 32 doesn't mean anything. Because what's helped us if I don't know? If I was working on a set of drawings and they tells me that the scale here is azoi, the scale here is azoi, how am I supposed to measure it? How are you supposed to measure it? But even if you want to make such a doichik, that won't work. You know why it won't work? Because let's look at how much of the azara Be'ach filled up. Imkain, Rav Chalo Azara. There's more space in the Azara than what the Mishnah tells us. The Tnan we learned. Kol HaAzara, Hoysa Oyrech Mea Ushmoinim V'Sheva. It was 187 amos long. Al Roichav Mea Ushloishim V'Chamesh. By 135. Mimizrach Lamar, from east to west, which means from you walked in the front door of the Ezras Noshim to the back, Mimizrach Lamar was Mea Shmoinim V'Sheva. Now, I'm not being accurate. I'm not talking about Ezras Noshim. The main Azara, past Shar Niknar, that was 187. Now, the Mishnah lists off exactly where those numbers come from. Makam Drisas Ragli Yisrael was Achas Esher. Now, these Amos have to be about Shisha Tvachim, because now we're talking about the dimensions of the structure of the Beis HaMikdash itself. So everything has to be about Shisha Tvachim. So it says, Makam Drisas Ragli Yisrael was Achad Esher, was 11 Amma. Umakam Drisas Ragli Kaihanim, until the Mizbeach, was another Achas Esher Amma. So we were so far at 22 Amos. HaMizbeach Shloishim Mishtayim, Amos of 6 Tvachim each. What's 32 plus 22? 54, right? Bein Ulam LeMizbeach was 22. So 54 plus 22 is 76 Amma. Ha'hechel Maya Amma. So we're now at 176. And then Achas Esrei Amma Achayre Basic Kapayas is 187. Based on this, you can't say that the 32 Amos of the footprint of the Mizbeach, some of them were Bas Chomish, because then they wouldn't fit here.
You have more space.
That's right. So now we're stuck. It can't mean the vertical because it doesn't fit in with the Chut HaSikra, and it can't be the horizontal. So we're stuck. What's Pshat? Zokt Gemara, you have to say it's a hin in there. Elacheka Amma, which is referring to the Amma of the Yesoid, that's Begoiva. Amma Roichev is speaking about the Soivev, that's Kenisa. And Gevula al Svasa Soviv, when you're talking about the Karnois, Loish Nahachi v'loish Nachi, either way it's going to work. Now we'll do the cheshbon. So kum t'chois, when you're getting smaller, right? You're getting smaller, but you're only getting smaller by two tefachim. You're only getting smaller by two tefachim because the Yosy was the width of the Yosy was 6 tefachim amma, a real amma. It's only the Soiv that was 5 tefachim. So you only lost 2 tefachim. 2 tefachim, like we said in the Mishnah, it could be like dog. 2 tefachim, it's less than an amma. So it's one this way, one that way. So now the Gemara makes the cheshbon as far as the height is concerned, because that's where it all started from the Chut HaSikra. So Zok the Gemara, loish nachi. So Mizbeach kamahava. How high was the Mizbeach? It was Chamshin Utmanya. It was 58. How do you get 58? Because it's 10 amas high, right? Out of the 10 amas, there was only one amma that was 5 tvachim. So 9 times 6 is 54, right? Plus 5 is 59, right? 6 times 9 is 54, plus 5 is 59. But it says Chamshin Utmanya. Why Chamshin Utmanya? Because it says the Karkana is Loish Nachi, Loish Nachi. So even if the Karen was only 5 Tvachim high, it will be fine, right? So even the Karen would be also only 5. So I am at 58, the total height. Palgin Mizbech, the half mark was 58, divided by 2. That's 29, right? So 29 tvachim from the bottom and 29 tvachim from the top was the chut sikra. Kamava, Esrin Vitisha. Now let's see where that was in relation to the Soivev. Mikanis vat Soivev Kamava, it would be Esrin Utlosa. Why? Because there's 4 amis, right? But one of the amis is only 5 tvachim, the Karen. So 3 times 6 is 18. Plus 5 is 23. So there's 23, and the halfway mark is 29. It's exactly 6 tvachim. So therefore it stems perfectly up to an amma below the soivev. You're still on the top half of the mizbeach. So kama botzer lapala the mizbeach shita 6 tvachim. Utnanim also lamatim iragla afilu amma achas ksheira. Mom is beautiful. You're going to ask me. You tell me the pasuk changes the middle. When it's talking about the amma 5 by the side, it's talking about the height. When it's talking about amma 5 by the side, it's talking about the horizontal. Why don't you say it's uniform? So it's more dekonami. It stims gavaltik because of the shinu eloshim. This is cheka amma in relation to the side, the amma roichev in relation to the soivev. Shema mina. So it stims perfectly. So the way we're learning Reb Meir is that the amma of Chamish of Tvachim that the pasuk in Yecheskel is maramis to is referring to the height of the Yesod, the roichav of the Soivev, and both of the Kronos. So let's just do the top Rashi where it talks about the Kronos. Loish nahachi klaimer knisasim the Kronos iboy lemeimer nami ba'amas chamesh loich b'stam that'll work. Even the Chnizas Yesod was Ba'ama B'Sheish, Loi Posh Loi Ben Karen L'Karen Elachov Vov Ba'arbet Vachim. You're not going to have any more 25. You'll have a little bit less than 25, but it doesn't. You'll have a little less than 26, but it's not a falama. So therefore, we're not worried. Right? Shtayim Mechnisa the Soiviv, Ushtayim Mechnisa the Karnos. So therefore, we're only off. We're only off by 4 tvachim, not a full amma. Even le'avama loy chashav la. Gewaltig. Mamish gewaltig. It's a geschmack gemara. So we didn't know Rabbi Yehuda yet, but we don't, I guess Rabbi Yehuda would have to work. Rabbi Yehuda held everything was uniform. Everything was 5. Everything was 5. Barakelim.
You really have a problem.
But then we should have a problem with the footprint, right? Because 32 amas by 32 amas was a 5, not a 6. I don't know. Maybe the Gemara will discuss it. I didn't see the Gemara tomorrow. Or you could say the Mishnah, at least going to quote Meir.
Yeah, but wait, but so because really, yeah. So how would the footprint?
So maybe it would be a little different. Maybe instead of saying there's 11 amas between the Mizbeach and the Soive and the Hechol, there was 11 and a half amas. But it'll be a little bit less.
Well, because that's how whole clothes will fit into 11 amas. It wasn't it was like a big unless they were standing outside.
Well, they could have been in there. There's nothing too. And I know in Yom Kippur they even stood around the sides too. They're all the way around. Right? There was a discussion. There was a discussion on the sides. If you could check there, it's called Sfeina. Okay, gewaltig. Then now I got to hazard this blot again because there's too many details. Because like Tosfos talks about how the height of the kevish lines up with this. So I didn't have a chance to do that. But there's so many moving parts here that have to be ice carpet.